Gentrification is a historical process and has happened in different places at different times. I wouldn't necessarily limit it to neoliberalism. I think there's earlier occurrences of similar processes. There's also, so many different definitions of what gentrification is. So you pick one definition and then you can find different timeframes. But we can already see in the 19th century or early 20th century branding processes of the real estate industry that tries to brand certain neighborhoods in New York, for example, and then to make real estate more valuable. So if you want to call this gentrification, which you can, I think, then this is not limited to neoliberalism. But this clear, or in 19th century Berlin, the idea of social mixing, for example, was very prominent by the urban planner, by James Hobrecht. The plan of Greater Berlin. His idea was also one of social mixing, and where his idea was that this working class people that lived next to bourgeois people, that somehow their behavior rubs off onto the poorer people. He was literally writing about this. So this is also related to what's going on with gentrification today. But of course, because you talked about the context we are doing our research in, for me that would be the US and Germany mostly for now. And this more, clear state-centered strategies of gentrification, I think, happened earlier in New York than they did in Berlin, for example. So in Berlin, that would be rather in the 1990s with the Sanierungsgebieten, for example. And in New York, that was already happening in the 60s and 70s as a branding strategy for neighborhoods. Yeah, thanks for the question. I think it's a very important question to clarify some of the things I said. On the political collectivity of today's social movements. So in the book, I describe their political collectivity as post-identitarian and post-autonomous. And I do that because I don't want to, I don't think they got rid of the concept of autonomy altogether. I think it's a still important idea of this tenant movement to include certain ideas of autonomy in their claims. So, and they do that by including claims of democratization, autonomy from the state. So they want state organizations, state institutions to provide social housing. But they also want the state institutions to be democratized and to be for tenants to be much more involved in the operation of these institutions, because they have also, of course, the experience that it's exactly those state institutions, for example, the municipal housing companies, that raise the rents, that have the highest quote of forced evictions, even higher than in the private market, and so on. So they they don't get rid of this autonomy claims altogether. But they also, due to their due to their basis, who's involved in this movement, which is a mix of people and also a lot of marginalized poor people, they know that to claim autonomy is a privilege, right? It's to talk about how we want to live together and stuff like that. It's a privilege. You can only talk about that once you have social security. And this is the first thing that has to be there, and then we can talk about how we want to organize this life together. But at the same time, they also say but everyone should have the right to talk about how you want to organize your life together. So we need the social security so that we can then talk about it. And in the campaign to expropriate Deutsche Wohnen, this is one of their claims too, right? They not only ask for the state companies, the municipal companies to buy this housing, but they also they say they want to socialize it, meaning they also want a new democratic institution to administrate this housing. And they have very particular models of how this should look like, and they draw from the whole tenant movement in their ideas when they formulate that. And this also touches on your second point about the anti-advocacy or identity-based politics, and if we can see a departure from that as well. And I think we can, not by people explicitly claiming, now I'm representing the interests of the working class or something like that, and or making this kind of Stellvertreter advocacy politics explicitly, but by this movement being post-identitarian in a sense that they claim a universalism. They claim a very broad we. And it's very dominant in a lot of their narratives. There's always a we and all of us, which is of course not true, right? They're not asking for a city of for all of us. They're asking for a city for those excluded, that are excluded now. So they're not asking for a city for the rich. So that would be all of us. But in their narratives, they always use this very broad we and a city for all and stuff like that. So in that sense, and of course that's not they're not all people are in this movement, so they are representing and they are doing advocacy, and they have most claims are targeted towards the idea that a lot of people profit from it materially.
Yeah, I think emancipatory and non-emancipatory are good terms in this way, in this context. And I don't mean this, but by this I don't mean that after the oppressed people riot, they will suddenly become all happy and emancipated. And no, but it's a moment of emancipation. In my view, there's an answer to your question. I might be wrong, but that's how I conceptualize it. I think it's equality. The principle of equality is a prerequisite, in my view, and I'm following Rancière, obviously. I mean, I'm interpreting Rancière in this context for emancipatory politics. So the right-wing fascist riots, hooligans are also, you can include in this. That's a disruption, but disruption is not necessarily political. For me, at least, for it to be political, disruption has to be in the name of and for equality. That's definitely not the case for right-wing. That's definitely not the case for fascists. And football hooligans couldn't care less. What's to be done, really? I mean, that's the problem is there's a whole economic system that's dependent on this now. And this, what we were talking about, is financialization of urban space. So that's a big problem. We all agree. We might think of solutions, but they will be radical.
I don't know if I agree with the premises of the question that the housing movement is so prominent or is so special at the moment. I mean, if you just look at the numbers of people who go to this kind of demonstrations or who are organized in initiatives, it's of course much less than in work issues, for example, or the biggest demonstrations we had were actually on food justice and on this in Berlin in the last couple of years, and not on housing. But they have a big representation at least in local media in Berlin, and I think that is more due to what I was talking about before, that now the middle class, meaning we, academics, journalists, and so on, are affected by it, and so it gains a more prominent position.